Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to Donington Park for round number 4 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship, the 2022 season, heading into a crucial point, really. We're midway through the season, still lots of races to go, but given how competitive the championship has been up until this point, you sense that the 3-hour fourth round of the championship that will take place here tomorrow could prove pivotal. It is a warm but overcast and slightly muggy day that greets the drivers for their qualifying sessions this afternoon, which will set the grid for tomorrow's 3-hour race. It may be 3 hours of racing, but the qualifying positions can, and in the past certainly have, proven to be very important here at Donington Park. Andy McEwen here in the commentary box. No David Addison this weekend, but I'm delighted to be joined once again, for the first time this season at least, by Joe Osborne. And Joe, I think I have to say nice things about you now, because we last saw you in the British GT Championship, not in the comms box, but out on track at Silverstone, where you were on the podium. Well done.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. I've only ever had nice things from you, so there's no hostility. But no, brilliant to be back in the commentary box. And yeah, luckily I proved that I'm not completely useless behind the wheel. And as they say, if you can't do it, then you teach. And I'm somewhere in between the two at the moment. So yeah, excited to be back. And 3 hours at Donington can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, it's always one of the highlights of the season, these 3-hour races. This is the circuit that will be facing the drivers. 12 turns, 2.5 miles. One of my personal favourites, Joe, and one that I'd imagine is pretty nice to drive as well. Yeah,
definitely. Obviously, the circuit map being two-dimensional, you don't get an idea of the gradient here, and that's definitely Donington Park's USP as a driver and a spectator. That first sector really dives down. You're looking at 200 metres of decline all the way through, and then you take the second sector to come all the way back up, and then you've got quite a tight, twisty, technical third sector with the chicane and the 2 hairpins, and that really was added to make the track long enough for F1, and it does kill the flow, but luckily for us it introduces 3 amazing overtaking opportunities and 3 areas where the cars really bunch up with that multi-class GT3, GT4 dynamic.
Yeah, often the scene of drama, that third sector, that is for sure. You notice there that Phil Keane is our lap record holder, also holds the unofficial qualifying lap record, which is likely to be beaten today, and he is down in the pit lane with Bryn Lucas.
Yeah, I'm with the nearly man, I suppose, really, of the British GT. Sorry, Phil, to say that, but the nearly man, you're always in contention when we come here for the season finale. You were last year, and Donington's a happy hunting ground for you. But you guys have done so well this season, even though your performances have kind of gone under the radar.
Yeah, no, we've struggled a little bit at the start of the year, but we're making progress, and the team have done a great job, and we've just stayed out of trouble and scored points, which is, you know, maybe a new approach.
Yeah, a kind of refreshing new approach as well for you. But the troubles for you guys are tyre related. How frustrating is it that you're having these problems, but you look at Barwell and they're not?
Yeah, I mean, we're just struggling to make the tyre work at the moment. We made some progress this weekend. You know, unfortunately, the temperature's dropped a little bit, which we do struggle with when the temperature drops, so we'll have to see how qualifying goes.
It was looking lovely about 10 minutes ago, wasn't it? And it has dropped, as you say. Michael's in the car, first of all. We know he's decent around here, but July last year, it didn't go to plan, did it at all?
No, it didn't. No, unfortunately, when we've qualified up the front, we've had a bad race. So maybe this time we'll qualify a bit further back and have a good race. Who knows?
Stay out of danger and maybe finish on the podium.
Yeah, that's the aim. Just stay out of trouble and see what we can do.
Good luck.
Cheers. Thank you.
Phil Keane there, as Bryn called him, the nearly man of British GT. He's been so close to winning championships in years gone by. Now, this is a car that will be familiar to anyone who has tuned in already this season, the number 15 Mercedes AMG from Ram Racing. This is a driver who may also be familiar to GT fans out there, Ulysse de Pauw, who we've seen racing this season in the GT World Challenge Europe, won a race at Brands Hatch as a silver-silver combo drivers as well earlier on this season. He is in British GT for the first time this weekend, and he was the fastest man across the 2 free practice sessions that we'd had already today. 2 one-hour sessions for the teams to fine-tune their setups, get themselves acclimatised to the track conditions, and for Ulysse de Pauw to learn the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit in a GT car. He's a former race winner here in British Formula 3 a couple of years ago, but moving into that Mercedes AMG. Really interested to see how he gets on, Joe. He was one of several drivers to get underneath that unofficial qualifying lap record, but he and that car and that team seem to be a good combination this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I think they have to be favourites for pole position in his qualifying. John Ferguson, first year in GT3, probably won't be, so a little bit difficult there as we see the green flag going. Richard Neary, the wiry old fox, as people behind him will be calling him, leaving race slowly on purpose, I would suggest, to create a gap to the Fletcher car in front of him. So this qualifying session's always interesting around Donington. You've got to get your space. With it being such a fast-flowing nature, the dirty air off the car in front is very big here. So you're going to want at least 3 or 4 second gap. So you're looking at 200 meters in the car in front. Otherwise, your downforce will be compromised.
Indeed, and it is not the longest of laps this, so trying to get yourself that bit of clean air is not always all that easy to do, and of course you have a limited amount of time to do it in. We have 4 sessions, all of them just 10 minutes in length. If you're new to the Intelligent Money British GT Championship and you don't know how this works, well, because we have just the one race this weekend, the 3-hour race tomorrow afternoon, it is a combined qualifying effort across both of the GT3 sessions and then both of the GT4 sessions that will give you the grid. So driver 1 goes out for the first 10 minutes. This, at least amongst the GT3 element of the grid, is the amateur group of drivers before the pros go out and set a lap time in qualifying session 2. You then add those lap times together to get a combined lap time, which gives you the grid for tomorrow. We then do the same thing in GT4. So it is not just the individual efforts by each driver that counts. You've got to have balance across your driver lineup. This is the team, I would say, Joe, which definitely has that. The Team Parker Racing Porsche, 2 drivers both capable of being competitive in their classes. Scott Mulvern, who will be out later, Nick Jones in the car now, and a car which certainly seems to be working around this circuit.
Yeah, the whole thing with the Porsche, the engine all the way on the rear bumper is the traction is always strong. So that final sector where it's all about traction, we're going to see that was tight. I thought contact. So I told everyone they needed a 200-meter gap, and we've got 8 cars within 200 meters. So pretty poor job by a few of these guys at finding space. So this new Pirelli, the DHF tyre, is super peaky, and by that I mean the grip is there straight away. Potentially only going to get 1 flying lap before you see a drop-off of around half a second in that tyre performance. If you don't get it on this first lap, you need to improve by half a second to be quicker. So we're going to start seeing the sectors popping up greens and purples. So we need to wait for the first 10 cars to get through and see who's got the purples then. But it's going to be difficult with the pairing element, like you said, the combined. I feel like probably the Enduro car at Tilbrook and Clutton, for me, is the favourite when you combine the 2.
Yeah, winners here, of course, at the final round last season. This was the car, though, which won the summer round here at Donington Park. Just a 2-hour race last year, but it was the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes AMG of Richard and Sam Neary, father-son combination, who managed to go from the very back of the GT3 grid, carved their way through to the front on what was an extraordinary opening lap for Richard Neary, and brought it home to get their first win together in the British GT Championship. We know the car goes well here. These two know the place like the back of their hand, and this is the first time all weekend that they've put fresh Pirelli rubber onto the number 8 Mercedes. He drops down into the Melbourne hairpin then, and this will be arguably one of our first real benchmark times. Richard Neary up into the last corner. Difficult to spot your braking point here. You've got to keep it as wide to the right on the way in, cut back to the late apex, get the steering wheel straightened, foot flat to the floor on the right-hand pedal, up through the gears across the start-finish line, and Richard Neary's benchmark time, a 1:29.238, there or thereabouts, I think.
Yeah, I've got a feeling the Ampole's going to be a high 27 if the track hasn't changed much from free practice. As we see Tilbrook go fastest on a 28.2, nearly proving my theory within a few seconds of it. So, yeah, it's interesting. We've got Ballon on 2 purple sectors, so he's the ultimate fastest guy so far in sector 1 and 2. He'll be coming across the line in the next 10 seconds, and he's going to be up there too. So it's been a quick start to qualifying for these AMs.
Yeah, there is Morgan Tilbrook then backing off now, I think. To your point about finding clean air, he was going so quickly that he caught the back of the queue and now has to drop back again. So this will be a lap to find clean air and cool down those Pirelli tyres, as Adam Ballon, as you predicted, Joe, goes to the top of 1:27.561, 7 tenths quicker than Morgan Tilbrook. That now is going to be the time that they will all have to beat, and they've only got just over half the session to do it.
Exactly, and what gets me really excited and greedy is think about the pros. If we're getting the AMs in the mid-27s, then we've got a chance of getting a 25 round here, and that lap record is going to be obliterated. It shows you what a good job Pirelli have done at developing this new tyre. As we see Tilbrook really backing off and Malaking running in deep there. It's a really tricky corner, that hairpin. The camera flattens it out, but it's a steep, steep hill down into it, so it's very easy to outbrake yourself. You see him using a lot of curb on the entry. And again, it looks nervous, that Lamborghini on the entry phase, as a lot of dust kicked up in his face for a bit of dramatic effect. I'm just going to see where he gets up to. P4, not a bad job at all.
No, not bad at all. They were on the podium when all was said and done at Silverstone last time out, this Team Redline operation. They currently sit 6th in the championship standings, but only 10 points off the top. It's remarkably tight in the championship standings for the time being. As, Joe, we are hearing our first track limits offences coming through, and in qualifying, you get no second chances. You lose that lap time, and already 2 important ones there. Morgan Tilbrook, who was provisionally the fastest, losing his lap time, as well as Michael Igo.
Yeah, track limits, it's unfortunate. We're just going to have to talk about it a lot, so I make no apologies for mentioning it a lot. It's the rules we've got to play with. The UK, we do have different rules, so it's slightly more difficult, in my opinion, to stay legal, but it's the same for everybody. And you've just, in qualifying, you've got to roll the dice. You've got to be on the limit. If you're within the limit, you're not going to be on pole. So it's getting that happy medium between the two, and we are obviously seeing a few people not getting that happy medium just quite right.
So at the moment then, it's Barwell Motorsport fastest with the number 72 car. Adam Ballon, no, it's not. James Cottingham goes quicker. Purple in the first sector, which meant he was quicker than anybody else, and then 2 personal bests in sectors 2 and 3 put the number 4 Mercedes onto the top of the times. Then the 2Cs Motorsport run car. This then Morgan Tilbrook taking lots of curb through the chicane there, hopefully not too much over the inside curve. Drops down into the Melbourne hairpin. The mid-engine McLaren, it does like these tight corners as well. It got some good acceleration off the turns. Not on course here for the fastest lap though, and of course, because he's already used the best of his tyres on a lap that ultimately wasn't allowed, that now immediately puts him on the back foot for the rest of the session.
Exactly, yeah. Like I said, he's rolled the dice probably a little bit too hard. My advice for qualifying would always be your first lap's your banker, because you've got that half a second of tyre performance over the rest of the laps. Get that one in and then start to roll the dice and see what the race director will let you get away with. As we see, he has improved though to go at 27.2, so he is on provisional pole by a 10th. You've now got this awkward minute to see if that previous lap was legal, as we saw him lose his previous one, but he's done well there and has got time for 2 more flyers. He's got the potential to improve even more, I think. And
lots of people are still improving as well with personal best sectors. A good lap on course here, I think, for Mark Sansom in the SRO Motorsport Bentley, car number 3, 8th fastest at the moment. Personal best in the first 2 sectors for him. Alex Maliakin, you can see, is not improving on this lap in the Redline Lamborghini, so as he drops into the Melbourne hairpin, he'll have time for, well, he'll have time for 2 more laps. It's whether he's got the rubber underneath him to set a better time. It's not that the tyres are wearing out, it's just, as Joe said, they've got that narrow window in which they give you the ultimate performance. They're still lasting perfectly well over the course of a race stint. Ian Logie, purple in the 2nd sector and personal best in sector 1 as well, so there are a few quick cars about to come across the start-finish line to register lap times. They're improving on their current times. Logie is one of them, Sansom another. John Ferguson just went through and set a personal best lap time but stays in 8th. Here comes Ian Logie though. Ian Logie, who at the moment is joint championship leader with the Balfe Motorsport Audi pairing of Sean Balfe and Adam Carroll. 43 points apiece for those 2 cars, and this is going to move him not onto the front row provisionally, but 3rd fastest. And again, these Mercedes AMGs, they seem to work well at Donington.
Definitely. What's really interesting here is the top 6 are covered by less than 0.3 of a second. Yeah. And what's interesting about that is the combined nature of the qualifying. For me, that gives the 6 pros that they're sharing with an opportunity of overall pole. And I think more than that, it's hard for a pro to make a difference. We really see a 10th or 2 being a lot of a difference for a pro, but 6 3/10 gives me optimism that the pro qualifying is going to be super intense in qualifying. And we see another purple sector 2 for these Mercedes, and they definitely like that middle sector, the flowing nature. Mercedes got a super stable platform at high speed, struggles a little bit low speed, as Cottingham does improve and gets that gap down to nearly just half a 10th to P1.
Yeah, could have been better though. That final sector, as you said, is not necessarily the area of the circuit that favours the Mercedes AMG, but Cottingham 2nd by under a 10th and has time for 1 more lap. Tilbrook fastest then for Enduro Motorsport, Cottingham 2nd fastest for 2Cs Motorsport, with Ian Loggie's Ram Racing Mercedes 3rd, and Adam Ballon's Lamborghini for Barwell Motorsport 4th fastest right now. Richard Neary already bailing for the pits, and that's interesting. I think they want to get their 2nd driver plugged in as quickly as possible, that being Sam Neary, so that he gets the maximum amount of track time within his session, because once the checkered flag falls, Jay, they've got to make it back to the pits, do a driver change and get back out there again, and there is a very small window between the sessions in which to do that.
Yeah, and you lose track position if you're in too late. As we see, the M4 is a big old car. This reminds me of the Bentley in a lot of ways. It looks quite cumbersome at low speed, but high speed it suddenly awakens with all the aerodynamics that are placed on it. You can see how aggressive that front grille is. Betty Chen on 2 green sectors, she's going to improve to a 130.8. I think she's doing a great job. She's less than a tenth off the guy in front. She's never been to Donington Park before. Not a huge amount of GT3 experience, so it's great to have such a varied sort of amateur grid as well as the pros.
Yeah, as you said, less than half a tenth slower than Simon Watts, who missed Alton Park but made his debut a couple of weeks ago at Silverstone. Are we going to see any changes here? Well, Morgan Tilbrook, already fastest in the session, still improving in the first sector, and worth doing because, of course, that does not guarantee him pole position yet. The more margin he can give to his co-driver, Marcus Clutton, over the second fastest car, the more chance they do have of starting the Enduro Motorsport McLaren from pole position. There is the Team Parker racing Porsche, topped the first practice session, 3rd fastest in session 2. I'm therefore left wondering, Joe, why that car is only 14th fastest in this session.
Sometimes difficult. Free practice is obviously practice, and qualifying when you get new tyres, low fuel, the car might not react the same way you're expecting it to. So there's a lot of guesswork in motorsport. Engineers won't agree with me on that, but you sometimes just have to take a bit of a punt on it and hope that you've gone the right direction for the qualifying session, and you'd obviously kind of state that that's not worked out for them, finishing up 14th. Yeah,
they are 14th. They're among the last cars to come through. We do get another improvement, though, from Tilbrook. So Tilbrook was in that group and found another half a tenth or so. That could be so important, though, given how tight these times are after the first half of qualifying for GT3. Morgan Tilbrook then in the number 77 McLaren fastest on a 127.185. Now, the unofficial qualifying lap record around here, set 3 years ago now by Phil Keane, was a 126.5, within a second of Phil Keane's existing lap record. Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see that drop in the second session. Ian Loggy, by the way, was that a lap time disallowed maybe for Tilbrook? Because Loggy suddenly 9 thousandths away from Tilbrook. So Tilbrook stays at the front, but by a very, very small margin.
Yep, you can see lots of warnings, and I think Morgan probably in hindsight rolled the dice too often, too risky, and he did his best lap on lap 7, and that's way too late for this Pirelli. So Marcus Clutton, his co-driver and his coach, will be pulling his hair out knowing what that car could have done to make his life a little bit easier, but easy to say from the commentary box.
Yes, so what happened then is Tilbrook lost a time whilst Loggy improved, so they stay in the same order, but look at that, 9 1/1000ths between Tilbrook first and Loggy second, with Cottingham third, also within a tenth of the top time there. So the top 3 at the moment covered by 63 thousandths of a second. Adam Ballon fourth for Barwell, Richard Neary fifth in the Team Aber Mercedes, ahead of Alex Maliakin from Redline Racing. Then it's the Bolf Motorsport Audi, the WPI Lamborghini there of Mike Ligo, only 8th fastest, whilst Ram Racing are 9th, and Assetto Motorsports Mark Sanson rounds out the top 10. Fox Motorsport, Paddock Motorsport and Greystone GT all together there, a group of McLarens as they are towards the back of the field, with the Team Parker Porsche 14th. Then Mia Fluid was 15th for the 76 team, Simon Watts 16th and Betty Chen 17th. Well, that was pretty competitive, Joe, and as you say, it rather whets the appetite for what is going to be a crucial second part of qualifying for GT3.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing a bit of a quick debrief here. Morgan will just be saying what the balance of the car is like, essentially, to try and give Marcus a heads up on how it's feeling. And I think Loggy's done a really good job there. You can see the job's not done after qualifying. You've got to jump out, get the next teammate in, which isn't a bad job when you've done a good job, but when you've had a shocking qualifying, all you want to do is get in the car and drive home. It's a little bit more trying. So you'll see the tyres getting taken off. They'll be used in the race tomorrow. Most probably as the start tyres. There's not normally a good reason to use new tyres at the start. You leave the pit lane, sit on the grid, they lose temperature. So another new set will be bolted on there for Callum McLeod. Green flag, and we see that Aber car leaving first. So like you alluded to, Richard Neary boxing early has allowed his son Sam to get out there and get good track position.
So as the second part of qualifying gets underway, we'll let the cars get up to speed, get some heat into their tyres, and we can head down into the pit lane. It is Enduro Motorsport fastest in part 1 of GT3 qualifying, and Bryn is down there.
Well, Morgan, that looked so good out there, didn't it? You had a couple of laps taken away, though, due to track limits.
Yeah, I did. I mean, there was a lot of traffic out there. I think for some reason, the Neary Team Aber was just backing everybody up into a huge pile coming in. I've never had that before. So we got really messy the first few laps. Now I think everyone was panicking to get the fast lap in. So probably pushing too hard, run a few limits, because I felt my back was against it already because of the traffic. But I got there in the end.
Yeah, and 9 1/1000ths of a second ahead.
Yeah, that's close. That's close.
So you've got your teammate going out there right now. What can he do?
Yeah, I think he's got a chance of putting it on pole. I mean, that'd be tough. There's fast pros out there, but I'd like to see him in the top 4. I think he's got that in him. So if we can get on pole overall, that'd be an amazing comeback from Silverstone.
Wouldn't it just? Well, you've laid the groundwork. Well done.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
So the second part of qualifying gets underway then with 8.5 minutes on the clock now, a 10-minute session again, and the pro drivers getting into the cars. These will be the fastest lap times that we see today, and very likely, as we said, that we'll get underneath that existing qualifying lap record set by Phil Keane a couple of years ago, a 1:26.518. This is the car then that currently is on pole position, but now almost none of that matters. The margins at the front, Joe, between those top 3 are so slight that it's almost a complete reset for those 3 teams. They still need to go out there and absolutely nail this second part of qualifying.
Definitely, and that really winds the pressure up on the pro even more, knowing it's all in their hands, really. The AM's done their job, and it's a strange mentality. Just because the AM's gone first, it feels easier for them because they don't know the end result, whereas it feels like the pro directly injects that pace into the final results. We see John Ferguson looking happy, pensive, sad, and angry all in one, it kind of seems. So Sam Leary's our first flying lap guy, so it's going to be hard to see the sectors. He's obviously going to be purple, I hope, otherwise something's gone on wrong then. You really see this Mercedes take a set, and by that I mean it turns into the corner and it almost rolls over to the side that's loaded, rubs along the side skirt and just grips and goes. It's quite an interesting car to watch, especially if you're track side. You see the sparks flying off it from the titanium skids, and it's so tight, the track limits there. The left-hand wheels through the right part of the chicane, the final part, cannot go over the white line. And I'm not going to say he went over the white line, but he was over the white line. So race control is going to be difficult to manage these pros, in my opinion.
Yes, we shall, I'm sure, see a few lap times being disallowed, but we'll see what happens in the early stages. The times, by the way, down the left-hand side of your screen, they are the combined times. So Angus Fender comes through in the SRO Motorsport BMW, the first driver in this session to set a lap time. It is immediately eclipsed by Sam Neary, who's half a second quicker than him, and on combined times that puts this car into provisional pole position, but we will certainly see quicker lap times coming in over the remainder of the session. Phil Keane logs a lap time in the 26s. We're expecting probably another second, maybe more, out of that sort of lap time before the remaining 6.5 minutes elapse. Marcus Clutton here turns into the Goddard's hairpin. What can he do then? This is the big one. The car that at the moment is on provisional pole position. A great effort by Morgan Tilbrook. This one for Marcus Clutton then is a 25.559. That is not, I guess it is, by a full second quicker than our existing lap record, and of course puts that car now back onto provisional pole position.
Exactly, that's a brilliant lap time by Marcus. So you see him actually kicking the dust up at the last corner. He was hooking the apex up so tightly. It's really given an advantage. See Callum McLeod coming through his first fly at 26.1. So, I mean, Marcus is nearly half a second clear of everybody so far. And like I said, this first lap for me is the lap. The pros are going to really struggle to improve like we saw the AMs over the stint. They just use the tyre up and they put so much more energy in it. It's even more extreme as we see more dust floating in the Donington Park sky.
Yeah, not sure who that was, but I see no car in the gravel, so whoever it was has carried on after a minor grassy moment. Lots of curb, lots of sparks. The Mercedes AMG here for Ram Racing being given a real workover. Ulysses de Pauw then, former British Formula 3 race winner, finished third in the 2020 British F3 Championship, so he knows the tracks here in the UK, but this a very different beast. It's not even the same kind of car in which he races in GT World Challenge Europe. That's a Ferrari, this a front-engine Mercedes AMG, but he seems to be getting used to it. This car fastest across the 2 practice sessions earlier on today. It is 4th fastest in this session at the moment, though, so that car would line up 8th on the grid on combined times for the time being.
Yeah, and we're just looking at the sectors, and it was just a bit of an average lap there. Nothing was lighting it up, it was steady. So I'm hoping they've maybe tried to get the setup to give them 2 flying laps, but we're going to have to see. We're not seeing a huge amount of improvement now over a lap. The odd green sector here and now, but to hook a whole lap up is difficult. We see Williamson coming out, running straight to the line, the shortest distance on that lap, 25.7 in the mixer. So we're looking pretty tight. We've got 4 cars within 0.3 of a second, and really when you go all the way down, it's like a second covering the top 15.
Yeah, it really is close, isn't it? Certainly on the times within this session, on combined times, top 5 covered by a second, as we get an improvement there for Callum McLeod, that was, I think. On board here, though, with Lewis Williamson. This car had to sit in the sin bin during one of the practice sessions today for exceeding track limits once too many at times, and therefore lost 5 minutes of its practice session, but I don't think it's hurt them too much. Williamson, third fastest in the session, third on the grid on combined times, and he makes his way towards the really tricky right-hander at Coppice Corner, gets the nose in, patient on the throttle, carries the speed out of the corner, and heads down towards that tricky chicane onto the GP loop.
Yep. And yeah, De Pauw actually is on 2 green sectors here at the moment and did improve slightly, so he's bumped the car up to 5th overall now. It's the timing screens are lighting up both ways, so people are improving and people are losing lap times as quickly as they are, but at the moment it looks like, to me, Clutton is safe with that provisional pole overall for him and the car.
Yeah, well, he's 2/10 quicker than anybody else in this session alone. Of course, they had 9 1/1000ths in hand over the Ram Racing Mercedes after Q1, but Clutton with a 125.4 now is looking pretty tough to beat. Let's get Williamson across the finish line then, second on the grid at the moment. That's where he will stay, because that wasn't actually an improvement that time around. So it is the 77 car on pole at the moment. There it goes up through McLean's corner, and you're right, Joe, we're seeing fewer and fewer personal best sectors now. Certainly the first sector on this lap for Clutton is not an improvement. He's still pushing on, though. I don't think McLaren designed that car to use quite that much curb through Coppice Corner. He's giving it a real workover.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be quite dirty, that OnlyFans car, by the end of the race, the amount of off-track excursions he's having. So as long as he's having fun. The McLaren, luckily I did a lot of the development in it, so I've probably hit bigger curbs than that quite regularly. So I'm quite confident that car's going to be absolutely fine. And I mean, I slightly have called it wrong. Clutton did improve on lap 4, so we saw Morgan do his best lap on lap 7. It was deleted because of track limits, but both of those guys are able to get another lap, and you see him going slow just to get a bit of a gap, potentially just get a little bit of heat out of those tyres and go again. He's going to line it up, slingshot it out, almost like a wet line, and he'll get a better speed. As we go to Rob Bell, great to have him as a one-off this weekend. Obviously worked with him a lot at McLaren. He knows his car inside out, and the Fox guys do a great job. And I know Nick Halstead's coming on leaps and bounds, so they've got big plans. Down in 13th at the moment, so I'm sure they're not quite happy with the car in some regard. It'll be interesting to see what wasn't quite what they wanted to optimise. Yeah, Rob Bell, experienced McLaren campaigner, of course. Former race winner here back in 2019 with Balf Motorsport in a McLaren at Donington Park. And yeah, he'll be looking to move up the order at the moment. 13th fastest within his session, 11th on the grid on combined times. New personal best lap time there you saw for Sandy Mitchell. That Barwell Motorsport car would now line up on the inside of row number 2. So at the moment, McLaren, Mercedes, Lamborghini top 3. The BOP working reasonably well. Certainly good variety at the front of the field, and that's of course a mid-engine car ahead of a front-engine car on the front row, and that's one of the great things about Donington. It's got elements that suit pretty much every type of GT3 car you can imagine. The margin then 4/10 for the Enduro Motorsport car as Rob Bell comes across the start-finish line and doesn't improve, so stays 13th within the session. It's really tight in that midfield, from Dorlin in 7th all the way down to Keane in 12th. There's a 10th of a second covering those guys, so I think you've nailed it. We go on board here actually, Rob Bell. I'll try and talk you through it. So through crane is easy flat here on new tyres, pull 6th, get the wheel straight, on the brakes, 4th gear if the tyre's good, smash the curb on the right, track limits on the left is really hot, can cut the corner a little bit here, shorten it out over to right as we see I think that was the M4 Fender kicking dust up, so you can see how much these guys are on the limit. Dorlin, it jumps here, you can hear it, the carbon fibre pound coins just falling off that car. It's brutal, but so good to see. I love seeing a car under load and heavily in action. Scott Mulvin goes 4th fastest within the session, by the way, in the Team Parker Porsche. That's only 11th, though. I think they'll be a little bit disappointed with that. Checkered flag is out then, so final laps being completed, and James Dorlin was green in Sector 1. This car then at the moment set to start 5th on the grid, and he comes across the finish line. Can he improve on that? No, takes the checkered flag. It is not a personal best lap time, so 5th is as good as it will get for Redline here at Donington Park, at least as far as qualifying goes. Through goes Sandy Mitchell, also failing to improve. Very, very few personal best sectors. Rob Bell is green in the first sector, so is James Kell, but both of those drivers a long way down the order. Scott Mulvin here barrels down towards the Robert chicane then, hits the brake
brakes, really, again, you can see the suspension moving a great part of the circuit to go and watch from there. You can get quite close to the track as well on the spectator banking, get a great view of just how hard they push these cars over the curbs. And now into these two hairpins, Melbourne and Goddard's, where this car in particular always seems to excel. Malvern, fourth fastest within this session, not improving at the moment on this lap, but as I said, outside of the top 10, and a team, Joe, that really could do with turning their season around this weekend.
Yeah, they've been riddled with bad luck, haven't they? Yeah. That sort of normal bulletproof Porsche reliability's left them lacking a little bit, like so much so they didn't make the race at Silverstone due to gearbox woes. And yeah, it's really difficult, especially for Nick Jones, who's such a nice guy. As we see two rather happy guys, I think they might be on pole position, and they're on pole by nearly 4/10 as a collective. So brilliant job by both of them, and it's quite cool when both the drivers are on pole. That really shows that the team have got it hooked up. They deserve it. It's not kind of an awkward one where maybe the AM's been a bit slow and the pros brought it to the front. So those guys, like you said, they won here last year, so I think they have done a mega job all round.
Here then is provisionally how the grid will line up for round number 4 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. Marcus Clutton and Morgan Tilbrook get the Enduro Motorsport McLaren that won here at the end of last year onto pole position in 2022. Second fastest then for Lewis Williamson and James Cottingham in the number 4 Mercedes, with Sandy Mitchell and Adam Ballon for Barwell Motorsport third, and Callum McLeod and Ian Loggy. Ian Loggy, joint championship leader, remember, starts 4th, but a few places ahead of the Balf car with which he shares that points lead. James Dorlin and Alex Maliakin were consistent on their way to 5th in the red line Lamborghini, whilst the Nearies, winner of this equivalent race last year, will line up 6th on the grid. Towards the tail end of the order there, you can see the number 2 McLaren, and then that Century Motorsport BMW. It is, though, Enduro Motorsport on pole position. Marcus Clutton fastest within his part of the session, and he joins Bryn Lucas in the pit lane.
Well, that wasn't bad, was it, Marcus? It was set up nicely after the first session, though.
Yeah, Morgan's done a mega stint in the Az all year, really, and you know, and he proved it again today. It's his first pole as an amateur. Amazing result. He's only been doing this just over a year now. First pole for me. Got here last year, Phil. He beat me by 6,000, so it's nice to actually get a pole for once, and another great step for Enduro and for me and Morgan.
It really is, and for you both there, when you stepped in the car, Marcus, that 9 1/1000ths of a second lead, did you think that you could get pole position, or did you think top 3, top 4?
Yeah, no, he didn't run track limits. Like, do you know what? I didn't think Paul was there, but yeah, we've had a tough time recently, and it was by that margin as well. And yeah, really happy with what we've been working hard on since Silverstone. This season is just not going to plan, and this weekend's just a reset.
For yourself, pressure on you now tomorrow.
Yeah, there is. I've got nothing to lose. I'm starting the race 4 points on the table, surrounded by people who've got lots of points. So I tend to keep the first place cleanly, obviously, but I've got nothing to lose. So I'm going to race hard for the win, because we need to win points. Simple as that. It's got to be a win.
Look, get your heads down. Well done.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you know what? Such a nice pair of guys, those two, and they are on pole position then. Enduro Motorsport top the times across both of our GT3 qualifying sessions. Morgan Tilbrook fastest in session 1, and Marcus Clutton in session 2. Halfway through qualifying here then at Donington Park, and already it is that number 77 McLaren that looks like the one to beat. The Nearies, though, they were consistently in the middle of the top 10 across both of their sessions. Richard Neary, we know he goes well here at Donington Park. Expect a feisty start to the race from him as he starts from midway through the top 10. The Mercedes being given a real pounding over the curbs at the chicane. It was the SRO Motorsport Bentley, one of several cars to run a little bit wide onto the grass exiting Coppice Corner, and finding clean air within the session wasn't always that easy to do either. Thankfully, though, for Enduro Motorsport, they were able to find the clean air at the right time, set the fast times, and go to provisional pole position. So that's GT3 qualifying done with, and now we move to GT4, where things have been a little bit more wide open, I would say, actually, in the 2 qualifying sessions earlier on today. It was practice sessions, I should say. SRO Motorsport were fastest on the combined practice sessions, so they're Ginetta looking fast here at Donington Park, and it always was a circuit that the old Ginetta G55 ran pretty well at. and they are fastest after the practice sessions team. Parker's Porsche second, and Century Motorsport BMW third, Audi fourth. So in GT4, it looks like perhaps even more so than in GT3, Joe, picking even a winning car is not going to be that easy to do.
Yeah, really difficult. And again, it's the nature of Donington. There's a corner that suits each car a little bit more than another car. So 5, 6 different brands of car, they're all going to win at some corner. It's really which corner you lose the least at is why you're going to be good. As we get the championship positions up, and you can see it's pretty tight with those top two, and then that midfield is all to play for.
Yeah, Richard Williams and Senan Fielding, what a season they've had so far. They won both of the Alton Park races and were third at Silverstone, so they lead the points from the Darren Turner and Matt Topham Aston Martin, which is the highest placed of the Pro-Am entries in GT4. Ross Wiley and Jack Browns, we spoke to Ross Wiley, I should say, earlier on. Of course, he's had different co-drivers over the years, sharing now with Matty Graham, so he is third in the championship, ahead of the Jack Brown, Will Burns BMW fourth, and then R Racing's Aston Martin, the two youngest drivers on the grid, Jamie Day and Josh Miller. I'm expecting good things from them, actually. I think this should be a good Aston Martin circuit, and they have been scoring decent points, actually, already within the GT4 element. They had a podium at Alton Park, a top 5 in the second race as well, so expect them to try and move their way a little bit further up that very, very tightly packed points table. Qualifying then underway. We're a minute into the session already, and no great rush at Stellar Motorsport to head out, Joe. We've seen this from them before. They are clearly confident they can get a good lap time out of the car, even if they sacrifice the first couple of minutes. Yeah,
maybe losing a lap if they lose this a little bit later, but what it does do is allows the team and the engineers to see where everyone is on track, and they see the space. Obviously, if you leave at the start in the big group of cars, it's a little bit more potluck where that space is going to be, and that looks timing-wise they're going to do. So we see the first GT4s getting ready to start that lap. They're just going to be on the start of their out lap, so they should be able to have a really nice pocket of space, which for me is more crucial than the extra lap that they have lost.
And we've just seen that Audi leave the pit lane right on cue, so they have no traffic around them at all. Still one or two others, actually. The Motus One McLaren also heading out onto the circuit. On your screen now, though, that is the number 51 Porsche for Veluga Motorsport. Now, this is the car which is shared by Ross Wiley and Matty Graham. Matty Graham joining the team last time out at Silverstone, where he and Ross Wiley finished second, once all was said and done, in the GT4 category. And they've just been quietly banking the points. Of course, because they haven't done every race together all season, it means that Ross Wiley is the only one of the two who will actually have a chance of being called Drivers' Champion at the end of the season. But Matty Graham, who he knows rather well, they're related these days, aren't they? Brother-in-laws, and they get on well, they work well together, and they've got a car which, again, I think will go well here at Donington Park. Actually, the Cayman seems to be one of those good all-rounders, doesn't it?
Yeah, unlike its bigger brother in GT3, the 911, the engine's more mid-engine, so it's less quirky in that regard, and it's just well balanced. It's in the middle of all of the windows that the BOP metrics use. So by that I mean it's not the heaviest, it's not the lightest car in weight, it's not the most powerful, the least powerful. Aero-wise, again, it's in the middle, so it does make it a little bit harder to race in that car. So at the end of the straights, it's never the fastest, and that's your easiest opportunity to overtake, obviously, and it sometimes looks like it has to lunge other GT4 cars. So hopefully we won't see that in the race and keep it clean, but it was a great illustration. If I go back to the start of his lap through Craner curves, you saw that big slide he had, and that's just down to the lack of aerodynamics that GT4 has compared to the GT3. So they're slower, but does not mean they're easier. That's a very popular misconception, I would say.
And I've spoken to quite a few drivers this year already who have raced in GT4, moved up to GT3, and actually made the step back into GT4. And they've actually said these cars, in a way, are more fun to drive because of exactly what you said. They're not on rails, they don't have all of that downforce, and because they're a bit less powerful, you have to keep the momentum up through the corners. You can't just point and squirt almost like you would in a GT3 car, get it stopped on the apex and then go. You've got to keep that minimum speed as high as possible through the corners, and at Donington Park especially, it's a real momentum circuit, so I'd imagine these cars are a real blast around the undulations and the sweeps of the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. Lap times coming in then, 1:35.0 fastest so far. That is Josh Miller in the R Racing Aston Martin, which I tipped would go well, and they're nearly half a second up at the moment.
Yeah, going on board with this Mustang. As soon as we go on board, I think we're watching a NASCAR race. You can hear that big dirty V8 going all the way through. Looks flat as well through the left, going to hold it open. And you can see, because he's got so much torque, he doesn't have to shift up or down the gears as much. So for a driver, that's much easier, not having to worry about how many downshifts or upshifts I'm going to need. Sweeping all the way through, easy flat through this kink, but then suddenly McLean's appears up on the hill. Need to get it in and pick up that apex curve. Otherwise, you'll run wide onto that very tempting runoff area, and you will lose your lap to track limits. As we see Williams just starting to get to the end of his lap, we see a purple 1 and a green 2, so this should be well up there too. Looks like he's catching that BMW. He might get another clear lap, or he might then get compromised on the flying lap after that. So he's going to come across the line. Got to be in the 34, sorry, to get there, and he is by half a second. Huge slide in the background for the Century M4 there. Did well to keep out the pit wall.
Really well, actually. Comes across the line in a cloud of dust, and having clearly scuppered that lap time, Miller goes second again there, so an improvement for the number 23 Aston Martin, which makes its way round the right-hander. Aston Martin 3 times in the last 10 Donington Park races. It's been an Aston Martin on pole position in GT4, but interestingly, in those most recent 10 races at Donington, the GT4 category only won from pole position twice, so track position perhaps not all that essential, especially this weekend, because we've got this 3-hour race. You can play the strategy game, but of course it's bragging rights, isn't it? You want to start at the front. In theory, that's the safest place to start the race as well, and Richard Williams at the moment gunning for that fastest time in part 1 of qualifying, already a 10th.5 to the good, and going quicker again on his second flying lap.
Doing really well, and as like I said, that BMW is probably not a bad spot right now to get a bit of a slipstream. Because they have less downforce, they're not affected by dirty air as much as the 3s I allude to. Huge slide through the chicane. If he doesn't lose that lap, he's bribed the race director, because he was miles off the track there. So I think he's going to lose this one, unfortunately. You might even see him back off in this last sector if he knows he's going to lose it to get that gap to the BMW. But unfortunately, all racing drivers think they're right, so maybe he won't, and he will try and finish the lap and see if he can improve it.
This was the car that started on pole position the last time we raced at Donington Park as well, here for the Donington Decider in 2021. So Richard and Senan know this place. They know the car works well around here. And are they going to improve on their time again? Yes, another half a second found there. Purple in the first sector, green in sector 2. But interestingly, sector 3, not an improvement. Maybe a sign that he's just started to have the absolute best out of the tyres. And that might be the best we see from the Audi, but it is 0.2 faster than the R-Racing Aston Martin. Third fastest for Freddie Tomlinson. Now, SRO Motorsports Ginetta G56 in its debut season of racing in the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. Again, we haven't necessarily seen the best from that car, as we're going to see the Audi sideways over the curbs and possibly the wrong side of them, Joe.
Yeah, that white line, as soon as you cross that, that's the track limit pop. And it wasn't intentional. As the car turned in, Richard's just trying to carry as much speed as possible, and the car's rotated, and that slide is forced him to put the opposite lock on. Unfortunately, he's turning right when he needs to turn left, and then when he arrives at the right-hand part, he has to cut that corner. So a lot of people are saying, why wouldn't you just have gravel there to stop you cutting it? It's a very valid argument, but unfortunately, if he had had that moment and dragged gravel onto the circuit, it then compromises the whole session for everybody. So it's never going to be right, track limits. We have to play with the rules we've got, as we see that Ginetta come over. And we talk about the BOP, the Ginetta really isn't in that window. It generates its lap time very differently, very light, less power, less aerodynamics, but that does mean it's very good on its tyres and brakes. So you sometimes see with the Ginetta, it never qualifies maybe as high as it should and as high as it should punch, but in the race those attributes start to come to it, and it can start to chip away at its sort of stint average pace rather than its one lap pace.
Yeah, I started to say earlier on that this car, they've had a bit of a troubled season. An accident at Alton Park. Silverstone never has been a good Ginetta circuit. Statistically, nor has Donington Park, actually. Again, in the last 10 races, we've not seen a Ginetta win or take a pole position within the GT4 element of the race. But, for whatever reason, this G56 is working well this weekend. It's been right up there in the combined practice times, and currently is third fastest, although not improving on this particular lap. Tom Edgar is improving, though, actually, in the number 48 Toyota Gazoo Racing Supra. He is currently 6th fastest and just went through, well, actually a personal best in the first sector in the end, not coming to much. 1 minute and 20 left, and relatively few drivers starting to find big improvements. Matt Topham, though, is somebody who's just improved, Joe, into 4th place. Yeah,
and a standout performance. Obviously, he's not fastest overall, but he's fastest in Pro-Am. So fastest bronze driver by a long way. He's on a 34.9. The next fastest AM that he's racing against is a 36.7. So 1.7 seconds quicker. That is great. And the advantage they have tomorrow is they have a shorter pit stop because they are that Pro-Am. So then you bolting in your Pro with that guy called Darren Turner with a bit of experience against silver drivers who have had a longer pit stop. Those guys are going to be looking really favourites for an overall win as a very early call on that one.
Yeah, these silver teams have to spend an extra 14 seconds in the pits at every one of their 3 mandatory pit stops. That's on top of any success penalty that they will have to serve at the final stop, finishing on the podium last time at Silverstone, because success penalties are back for this round onwards. We'll get into that more tomorrow, but yeah, it does always give a bit of an advantage to these Pro-Am teams. Of course, the reason for that is that a Pro-Am combo, in theory, will lose time over 3 hours of racing over 2 silver-graded drivers. It always balances out well. It's almost always pretty close at the end between the 2 classes, but it does help that Matt Topham is a very, very quick bronze-graded driver, almost knocking on the door of being a silver, you'd imagine, and this team, Newbridge Motorsport, using his ability and Darren Turner's years of experience to really, really good effect. Qualifying over then, checkered flag is out, still a few on flying laps, but it looks, Joe, like it's going to be, we've said this a few times this year, Stellar Motorsports Audi, fastest in the session. Yeah,
mega job by Richard Williams. Again, he was a bronze driver and he was way too shiny, so he's been upgraded to a silver, and you can kind of see why if he's still qualifying pole overall. And then his teammate Senan Fielding, super, super fast as well. So I think, unfortunately, if I'm being a bit boring, I think we might see a similar GT3 story in terms of the fastest Am and the fastest Pro being in the same car, thus being on pole position overall. So it's going to be interesting for the race. They sometimes seem to have a bit of an electrical gremlin, I think, that seems to hurt them, and that's why we haven't seen them convert as many poles into race wins as they would have liked.
I remember one of the Donington races last year, they broke down early on. It was the first one, but they were only 8th in the race, having started on pole here in October as well. So, yeah, for whatever reason, last year, at least, in the races, they seem to have nothing but bad luck. But so far in 2022, the Stellar Audi has just been so tough to beat. Tom Edgar here, coming down into the Melbourne hairpin. He's taken the checkered flag, but 6th fastest in the Toyota Supra then, the car that sits 9th in the points. They've had just the 1 top 5 finish so far this season, that coming in the 2nd race at Alton Park, and the Toyota Supra, I expect, again, to be pretty quick here at Donington. In fact, everyone looking pretty quick. We've got the top 8 covered by 0.6 of a second after part 1 of the Intelligent Money British GT4 qualifying session. Still the 2nd session to come for the, in theory, quicker drivers. And again, it's combined times that make the difference. Right, Stellar Motorsport, fastest in part 1 of qualifying. Bryn, what have they got to say?
This is a pretty good habit for you guys. We've seen you win 2 races, a 3rd place, 2 pole positions. Well, it's going pretty well for a 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I've been so nervous about today, because we've had a real, it's not been easy. We've kind of, the way that the championship is kind of seesawing around, and the way that the balance of performance is kind of, a lot of the other cars are looking quick this weekend, so to pull that lap out, I don't know. I don't know how I did it, but it's just one of those laps that came together again. So yeah, something going on.
You're making a really good habit of it, and now Senan's got to get in the car and do something pretty decent as well. But he's been pretty consistent as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said last time to you that he's just annoying, but he's just annoyingly good, is what I meant to say last time we actually talked about it. So I've got no doubts that he's going to go out and absolutely smash it. So yeah, feeling pretty confident now that we can actually, hopefully, start where we need to start tomorrow.
Well, you're keeping yourselves happy and you're keeping your sponsors happy, so well done.
Thanks very much, mate. Cheers.
Typical racing driver there. He's just gone fastest by nearly 2/10, and the first words out of his mouth were BOP. Funny that, isn't it? Fastest then for the Audi, Richard Williams from Josh Miller, 2nd fastest in the Aston Martin, and 3rd fastest, the Ginetta of Freddie Tomlinson. You see, that's what the balance of performance does. 3 completely different cars, next to nothing to choose between them in the session. Matt Topham's Aston Martin is 4th. He's the fastest bronze driver, ahead of Marco Signoretti, the Canadian driver, 5th in the Academy Ford Mustang. Ross Wiley's Porsche was next, ahead of Tom Edgar's Toyota. Jack Brown's BMW, great variety in GT4 in 2022. It's the other Century car, 9th then of Tom Rawlings. Ashley Marshall was 10th for Paddock Motorsport. Team Brit 11th, Motor1 Racing 12th, and Team Parker Racing's Porsche Cayman rounds out the 13 GT4 runners, and that is the car that I was just talking. No, it's the other Team Parker car, isn't it? That is in the pit lane, the number 65 car. That at the end of yes, that session was 13th fastest in qualifying. So part 2 of qualifying about to get underway. The temperature's starting starting to drop a bit now as we get into the afternoon, but it has been a very warm day here at Donington Park. The forecast tomorrow, though, Joe, we're hearing is for it to be hopefully still dry, but quite a bit cooler. So do we necessarily expect this order that we're seeing today to be jumbled a bit because of that? Will some cars maybe react differently to that than others?
Yeah, it's a fair comment and a stupid comment in equal measures, and I'll allude to that by the cars can be changed setup-wise. It's not like Formula One where after qualifying the cars go into apart firmware conditions and can't be touched before the race. So the teams can change the setup, but like I said earlier, you can't just guess perfectly what you're going to have to do. And that 5 degrees is huge. That's air temperature. But if it's less sunny, the track temperature could actually be more like 10 to 15 degrees cooler. And that completely changes how the tyre reacts. Pirellis normally like to be in a window of 100 to 100 degrees Celsius operating temperature on the surface. So if you're losing 15% of that from the ambient temperature of the track, suddenly you need to be creating this energy, stiffer springs, stiffer roll bars, changing the damping setups, more downforce. So it is a good point, like I said, but the top teams should have a matrix formula to be able to how to get that temperature and energy back in the tyre, essentially.
It is a real science, and it's a side of the sport that I don't confess to be an expert on. That's why we bring Joe along to explain all of these things. But it can make such a big difference, and it's why sometimes you will see a team that perhaps excelled the day before in qualifying, just not quite have that ultimate race pace. And over 3 hours, if you're a fraction off every lap, then that's going to add up to a huge chunk of time over the long race that we have coming up tomorrow afternoon. So the final part of qualifying this afternoon is now underway. This is for the quicker of the silver drivers within the Silver Cup class cars, and then the pro drivers in that handful of pro am entry teams that we have. Still one or two of the driver changes and tyre changes ongoing here. Beluga Racing are still plugging in their second driver, and this will be Matty Graham, will it not? I think it was Ross Wiley who was out in the car in qualifying session 1. Down off the jacks it goes. Off it goes down the pit lane, and again a fairly leisurely start to the session for quite a few teams. Out goes Joe Wheeler in the Assetto Ginetta. Interested to see how he gets on here. This is the most competitive this car's looked so far this season, I'd say. Can he back up his teammate's pace?
Yeah, and I think I'll go up after qualifying actually and speak to the team, because it looks like a new car to me this weekend. So I don't know after Silverstone if they've changed cars. I think Freddie Tomlinson can probably get quite a good deal on Ginettas from Lawrence, the owner of Ginetta, and more importantly his father. And you do sometimes find that a chassis can just get a little bit older. It doesn't break, it just degrades. So everything starts to flex a bit more, and the handling characteristics start to change. So I'll go and find out for tomorrow if it's a new car, but definitely something's changed in that team, and the performance is massively up on where they've been.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know, actually. Joe Wheeler heading out of Coppice Corner. He's been a little bit down on practice this week in the build-up to the event. As you know, Joe, it's not just the free practice sessions of the weekend which the drivers and teams use to learn the circuit, but they will often test in the week during weekdays. Not normally much of an issue if you are a pro racing driver or a wealthy businessman. If you're a teenager doing your A-levels, though, as Joe Wheeler is, then sometimes that has to be the priority, and I believe that was the reason that he wasn't able to test this week. I mean, it reminds you just how insanely young these racing drivers seem to be these days. Yeah,
they can be 16 years old, and we've got 2 of them together, so you've got a combined age that's younger than me in one car. You see him going very slowly, and I fear that's a problem, not strategic. And I hope he hasn't just thought about his A-levels and not something off. But sometimes you get it looks like, I was about to say, can power cycle the car. So like when your printer doesn't work at home, you have to turn it off and on again. They can be like that. So it's moving under its own steam at least now. So let's see if he carries on or pits. That will really show how big of the problem was. And you are right, he carries on. So hopefully that car's fine. Yeah, the problem with being a young driver that's doing his A-levels, if you're clever, you have to do the exams, where I was invited not to do my exams at the school to bring down the average, so I think I hit the sweet spot just there. There you go, every cloud and all that. You've gone on to do pretty well for yourself, Joe, and I'm sure that Joe Wheeler and Freddie Tomlinson will also do the same. Both of them, of course, from racing families, and great to see them teamed up in that Assetto Motorsport Ginetta. Right then, lap time-wise, what are we expecting? The GT4 qualifying lap record set by Dean McDonald in a HHC Motorsport McLaren a few years ago is a 134.443.
Well, no, it isn't, because Darren Turner has now done a 134.356. No real surprise there. Darren Turner, one of the few out-and-out pros in GT4 this year, and he's already underneath that record.
Yeah, the only thing that makes me hold my breath a little bit is this track limit thing. So I agree with everything you said. Let's just give it a minute to make sure. We've seen car number 90 already lose its first lap, and yeah, it's so painful when you lose that first lap with this tyre dropping off like it does. And if motorsport fans don't know who Darren Turner is, then I would say you're not a motorsport fan. His CV is longer than my nose, and he's just won absolutely everything there is to win. So it's really cool to have him in British GT and in GT4. It really kind of shows Aston Martin's commitment to the cause to be able to loan one of their most lucrative drivers into the class.
Yeah, and he is one of those drivers who I mentioned who reckons that GT4 is about as much fun as you can have in a GT car, and he should know. He's raced GT3, GT2, GT1 cars back in the day as well. Darren Turner certainly knows his stuff, and all of it pretty much in Aston Martins. Right, Matt Cowley then in the Academy Ford Mustang, and Ford Mustang with Academy Motorsport were on pole position here 3 years ago for the final round of the 2019 season, and of course won here at the end of last year in GT4 in the wet, which was a bit of a head scratcher for a lot of people. It looks quick in the dry as well though, because that's third on the grid provisionally. Again, it's the combined lap times this session plus the fastest lap time from the earlier session that sets the grid, and so it is at the moment the Audi fastest from the Newbridge Aston Martin second, and Matt Cowley putting that Ford Mustang into third. Then it is the R Racing Aston Martin fourth fastest, as Darren Turner, just in case that first lap gets disallowed, make sure he goes even quicker again. A 34.0, that is fast.
And amazing, that puts him just over a tenth of a second off overall pole position as well. For a Pro-Am car to potentially be on pole position overall is almost unheard of in these combined qualifying sessions. So it's really good to see. We're still seeing some improvements. Well, Senna Fielding has just upped that little bit to give him a bit more space as we see him on track, kicking up the dust. And this is where track limits gets interesting, flashing his headlights on the Jetta. He won't get done for track limits there because it's not monitored, because it's not performance gaining it. That's more of a mistake. When you're cutting corners and gaining time, then that becomes an issue. But he would have really lost time having to get past this Ginetta here, but does have clear space ahead and should get another. He's going to be tight on 2 or 3 laps within a second or two.
Yes, lap time disallowed there for Matt Cowley, by the way, so the Academy Mustang will drop back down to 4th on the provisional grid. Through goes Fielding, still an improvement despite that bit of traffic in the final sector, and that will now just further extend this car's margin on combined lap times for pole position. So it's still going to be Stellar fastest then from Newbridge Motorsport second. You can see there just over 3/10 now between them. Then quite a gap back actually to a very, very close pair for 3rd and 4th. Look, you've got the R Racing Aston Martin 3rd, the Academy Mustang just 5 thousandths behind, and up into 5th place on the grid now goes the Toyota, because that was an improvement there for that car. And as Senna Fielding bails from the lap and just makes absolutely sure that he doesn't impede those cars which are still on flying laps. But yes, the Toyota improving now onto the inside of row 3 for the moment.
Yeah, Stellar Fielding was a really nice guy there in terms of really got out of the way. Especially, like for me, I'm too bitter and resentful. That Ginetta held me up in Sector 3. I'd be like, I'm going to let you through, but I'm not going to make your life easy. But showing what a class act he is, and I think it's probably a bit easier when you kind of know you're on pole position. You can look like the nice guy in a few more ways.
Seb Hopkins here, 2nd fastest in this session, only 14 thousandths slower than Darren Turner. That's not a bad thing to be able to put on your CV. It's sideways through the chicane. That was a good catch. The lap is gone, but he did well not to lose control of the car completely there. Limited runoff area at the chicane. There's a bit of grass, a bit of gravel, and then a very hard wall, which you do not want to be hitting at any point, certainly not right at the end of qualifying. Doesn't give the team much time to get the car fixed. Did a really good job of saving that, but perhaps has now found and exceeded the limit of that car. But a 34.077 is quite the lap time, and it puts that car, well, still slowest overall. That's a real shame, because Hopkins clearly is right on the pace.
Yeah, we saw that car was over 6 seconds off with Jamie Orton, and
right.
Jamie Orton is not 6 seconds off. So he must have just had a problem that he couldn't fix in the session, and once they got the car back in the pits, they could fix it, because yeah, that's a mega lap by Hopkins, and it's going to be an interesting race for those guys being last, but also that much further up as Darren Turner bangs on the door of the 33s with a 34.00 1. It is certainly fastest new Pirelli tyre.
Yes, most definitely. We haven't always seen that be the case in GT4, actually. GT3, we've been breaking lap records in every session. GT4 has been a bit more touch and go, but yeah, 34.0, half a second now up, nearly, on the existing qualifying lap record. It's still a quarter of a second off pole position, though, for Darren Turner. This was the moment for Hopkins. Did a really nice job not to lose it there.
Yeah, I like when the driver wears a light-coloured glove and you can see it working hard through the windscreen. His left hand was actually in the right-hand position, and then suddenly you see it flip 180 degrees back to straight. So big laughs. Richard, I think, can actually breathe now. I'm amazed how negative he was after it. He's obviously had a nightmare or something overnight and is a bit worried about it. But those guys are going to be happy with an overall pole position. And like we said, pretty similar in regards to the GT3, that two fast guys have managed to hook it up and get that car up there overall.
Now, they will have a success penalty to serve tomorrow, which will come at the final one of their 3 mandatory pit stops. So again, important they start at the front and try and stay at the front, build a margin over the rest of the field through the first 2/3 of the race or so. And then when they make that final pit stop, perhaps the success penalty won't cost them too dearly. Quite a lot of drivers heading for the pit lane. Again, these are the faster of the drivers in the cars, so they likely extracted the pace from the car and the tyre earlier in the session, and now over half of them have headed for the pit lane, and those still circulating are massively improving. Joe Wheeler, I noticed, only 13th fastest in the Ginetta within this session. That has plummeted that car from the top 3 originally on the grid all the way down to 9th place, although he is improving again on what will be his final lap of the session, because the checkered flag is out. Not a lot of cars still out on circuit to take it, and a lot of them, I think, realising that they had had the best of the car earlier on. Darren Turner fastest in the session, but again, it is Stellar Motorsport who look to be the quickest overall. Senan Fielding was 3rd fastest in this session, 2/10 slower than Turner, and that puts them a quarter of a second up on combined times.
Yeah, we must have lost quite a few laps, Wheeler, here, because he was higher up than this. What his lap time has alluded to. He was green in Sector 1 and only what's it going to be, a second off in Sector 2. Big slide out that last corner. I think he knows the TV camera's on him and he's doing it for the crowd back home, and he's going to be the last guy to be able to make any difference here at all. So he tucks it into the last corner and he's just straighten that wheel up, get it up to the exit curb, bit of dirt, run it to the line. Is it going to see an improvement? No. Cool. Got to waste my time.
You built that up well there, Joe. Thank you. To be fair, none of the last 3 corners went well there, did they? He was all out of shape at the chicane. He was wide at Melbourne, wide on the exit of Goddard's as well. An angry driver, perhaps, having had, as you suspected, lap times disallowed earlier on, and that means he'll be slowest in the session, but still 9th on combined times. That is the flip side of this combined qualifying. If you have a bad session, your teammate can always pick you back up a little bit and send you further up the grid. Darren Turner then fastest in qualifying 2 for GT4 here in the Intelligent Money British GT Championship, but it's the car which was 3rd fastest in that session, Senan Fielding, who will line up on pole position in the Stellar Motorsport Audi, and Senan Fielding is down there in the pit lane, reunited with Richard Williams and Bryn Lucas.
Martin, the number 23. Not bad at all. But Senan, you got out with a minute to go. That's confidence, isn't it?
Definitely not. No, it was. To be fair, we did the time, and I think the whole team was just there working out the combined times, and we did what we just needed to do. The car felt mega. Richard did such a good job in the first stint. Kind of made my life a little bit easier. So he did all the hard work, and then I just get to take the glory at the end. So no, it was a mega job by the whole team.
Well, Joe in commentary was saying you sounded really nervous when we spoke to you a few moments ago, Richard, but, you know, that did go to plan for both of you. This 1 lap pace you're getting from the tyre, it really is working, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, it's just all down to the hard work and all of the testing that the whole team has been doing to try and just unlock that 1 lap performance. And yeah, we definitely have the advantage that we thought we had, but we'll take that.
Well, 2 wins so far is boding well. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Awesome job from Stellar Motorsport then, who are proving hard to beat in GT4 this year. They will be on pole position provisionally for round number 4 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship, within the GT4 category at least, with Newbridge Motorsports Aston Martin 2nd and R Motorsports Aston Martin 3rd. Again, that front-engine Aston always does seem to be pacey here at Donington Park. Park. It's then another couple of front-engine cars next. The Ford Mustang from Academy Motorsport is 4th, and the Toyota is 5th fastest. Jordan Collard and Tom Edgar, with Matty Graham and Ross Wiley, championship contenders most definitely in GT4, rounding out the top 6 in their Porsche. That, I think, is 5 different marks in the top 6 on the grid. In fact, 6 different ones in the top 7, because it's the pair of Century Motorsport BMWs next. Will Burns and Jack Brown ahead of Chris Salkeld and Tom Rawlings, with Joe Wheeler and Freddie Tomlinson's Ginetta 9th, and then it was the Paddock Motorsport McLaren which rounded out the top 10. After an eventful pair of qualifying sessions, the GT3 sessions were very competitive, so too the case in GT4. The R Motorsport Aston Martin was near the front in both of those sessions and will start on the second row of the grid for tomorrow's 3-hour race. The Century BMW so nearly lost control exiting the final hairpin. In fact, quite a few drivers were pushing and maybe exceeding the limits of adhesion, even the pole-sitting Audi in trouble at the chicane, before there was a strange moment for Joe Wheeler's Ginetta, which slowed at the end of its first flying lap, but did eventually get back up to speed. Newbridge Motorsports Aston Martin was quick either in the hands of Matt Topham or Darren Turner. Turner fastest overall in the second portion of qualifying, but missed out on pole position by around a quarter of a second once the times were combined. Team Parker Porsche had issues in qualifying session 1 and almost big issues in session 2, but a good save at the chicane kept the car in one piece for tomorrow's 3-hour race here at Donington Park.